Welcome to the Nairn County podcast, which is brought to you in association with our digital partner Ziyen Energy, the leading blockchain software and digitalisation experts leading the field in emerging technologies related to oil and gas tokenisation. For more, go to ziyen.com. We're now halfway through our episode 4 and Graham McLeod's in-depth chat with county legend David MacRae. In part 3, Davie talks us through the day his Inverness CT Thistle career came to an end and moving on to join Nairn County permanently. The historic 2005 North of Scotland Cup final win of Forest Mechanics and scoring what he regards as one of the best goals of his career. Davie kicks off this part by recalling the day he scored the first of his 4 senior hat-tricks, all of which came in Nairn County colours. We hope you enjoy listening.
Yeah, you're moving along nicely that season during the loan spell. Probably the highlight came towards the end before the loan was up, and that was a 3-1 home win against Fraserburgh. He scored a hat-trick, all 3 goals for us that day. Do you remember anything about that game?
See, Fraserburgh were a funny one. I always fancied us at home against them for some reason. But going to Bellslea, I always felt, you know what, we could be on the end of a hiding here. I don't know what it was. They were just a different animal at home. But that particular game, I don't know what it was. Everything just seemed to fall to me. Could easily have had 5 or 6 goals if I remember right. I remember the final goal pretty clearly because I remember it bouncing up and I've actually headed it on with my head. The only reason I remember that is because Stevie Edwards used to always say, yeah, when you're running forward and the ball's bouncing, you always seem to header it forward. And I never noticed it until he'd mentioned it. And that goal sort of summed up what he was saying. I sort of headed it forward and just, I remember Billy Gordon come charging at me and I'm thinking, and I've just sort of hit it and it's gone in the bottom corner. And I think it was more relief because I did feel like I had a hell of a lot of chances that day that I hadn't converted. So when that one went in, I think that would have made it 3-0 or 3-1 at the time. I think it was just more relief rather than I've scored a hat-trick here.
After the loan was up in January, you leave Inverness permanently. There's been a change of manager in the meantime with CT Thistle though in between that. So do you remember the conversation when it's come to an end at CT Thistle? And do you think you were in with a shout of being kept on given your form?
It's a funny one because, like you say, there's a change of management. So Robbo and Parky went to, I think it was Hearts at the time, and in came Craig Brewster for his first appointment, and he brought a guy, Malky Thompson, who was previously at Rangers and a few other clubs. And I don't know, I just got that sense that my time was up as soon as they came in, because I obviously felt at the time that I wasn't never getting anywhere with Robbo and Parky. So when that first came about, I thought, you know what? Who knows what's going to happen here? Maybe someone will come in, might take a fancy to me, might actually think, I'll tell you what, he can play. But it never turned out that way. And I always struggled to get any sort of real communication from Brewster about my future or what he thought of me as a player, what I should develop more. It was more, he looked at me as being playing Highland League. So I think that was him like, well, he's playing Highland League. He's never making it Premier League, is he? So even though I was doing well for Nairn and scoring goals and kind of making a name for myself in the Highland League, it never really filtered back, I don't think. Or if it did, it didn't sort of have the effect that I was hoping it would. So I remember coming up to Christmas, I went in with my stepdad at the time and had a meeting with Brewster, and I basically put it on the line to him and said, look, I've got 6 months left in my contract. What's happening? Am I going to be getting a new deal at the end of this year? Do you want me to come back from loan so I can kind of show you what I can do in a game? Or what do you want? And the communication back was very, it was non-existent really. There was no real communication about what he thought or what he felt. And I basically said, like, do you want me here or not? Or let's just tear up this contract, or what do we do from here? And I just got the sense that my time was up. So he didn't say it in so many words, but he basically said, yeah, okay, you're probably better moving on. So that was it. The day after that, I went into training, trained, and then said goodbye to everyone. That was me. And then I got signed for Nairn the next week.
Yeah, so you've come to us on a 2.5-year deal. Did you have other offers at all? And do you think you could have given it a go somewhere else full-time or in the Scottish leagues at that point?
It happened so quickly. And I think at the time, I wasn't enjoying full-time football. You can imagine it yourself. If you're going into a football club where you're probably nowhere near the first team, you're looked upon as kind of just making up the numbers, I think, so to speak. I just didn't feel part of it. So it was sort of time to go. And it happened so quickly. I was already at Nairn. I was happy at Nairn. I was playing well. And speaking of Nairn, they were very optimistic about like, come here, any opportunities come arise. If anyone comes interested in higher leagues, like, we won't stand in your way. I was happy with that. I thought, you know what, it's time to get a job. So yeah, I was happy to sign in Nairn at that time.
How did you find the adjustment to part-time football? Previously you're training however many times a week, 4 or 5 times a week, but now you're having to go in to your work and then come through to Nairn on a Tuesday and Thursday to train. How did you find that adjustment?
It was difficult, yeah. I think anyone making that adjustment finds it difficult. You can keep yourself as fit as you possibly can, but anyone that works, the last thing you probably want to do after a full day's work, and the work I was doing, it wasn't really manual. It wasn't really physical lifting. It was lifting boxes. It wasn't hard. I was fit at the time. Everything was good. But having a day there, 9-10 hours there, and then going to training was difficult. It was probably not the last thing you want to do, because you enjoy your football, but it is tough. Your fitness level does drop a little bit, and it is adjustment. I kind of felt like I had to adjust my game a little bit to that, but I always had that conversation with Parky in my mind: get yourself as fit as possible and keep that, because I knew that was the one thing that was helping me score the goals.
Well, the sort of first games after you permanently signed, the second half of that season, was a home win against Inverness, where we came back from a goal down. You've got yourself the winner. Do you remember that game?
It's funny. I've actually got a photo of that goal celebration in a frame. I think it was one of my mum's personal favourites, if I'm honest. It was I don't know what came over me. It was the start of the knee slide celebration. Looking back, the hair is horrendous, and the shirt, honestly, I maybe just squeezed into it now, but I probably could have fit about 3 or 4 of me into it that time. Yeah, it was one of those. Inverness were always a tough game, and I always felt those Aberdeenshire teams were tough to play against. They were always physically strong and really fit size as well. I always felt they had a real edge to them. But yeah, that was a good game. I remember just knocking the ball over the keeper, and then, like I say, doing that stupid knee slide that probably grazed both knees at the same time, and probably angered Michael and Peter by scuffing up the pitch. But good times, obviously, yeah.
The following season, 2005-2006 season, a really memorable one for a lot of reasons. We'll come on to that in a moment. But it's your first pre-season with the club. Made some real quality additions during that summer as well. Were you confident going into that season that you could really make an impact?
There was quality in the team. Like, you look through the spine of that team, even before those signings, for example, the core of the team that had been there for long enough and actually stayed beyond the sort of Sharpie and Fridgie sort of, I wouldn't call it exodus, but there was a lot of players that left. Like your likes of Willie Barron, Brooksy, Kel, Tess, Johnny Seaton, all these sort of boys, they were kind of there, and then obviously a couple of them moved on, but there was always quality in the team. And I always thought if we got ourselves playing the right way and playing to our strengths, I always thought, or was confident, that we could actually do a lot better than we currently were. Personally, I always thought the Cups were our best chance of anything. At that time, the Aberdeenshire teams were running away with the league, for example. Like, I remember I used to always hate playing Devon Vale because they used to spank us, and it was always like a 7 or 8-1, 7-2. And I used to dread those games coming up because, again, like, what would I have been then? 2021. I was still stick thin, probably get blown over in the wind, and coming up against these boys, they were just physically stronger, just probably all round good players. I always felt that we had a right good quality of player in the team, but I always felt we lacked something that, I don't know, maybe that little bit of dig or a little bit of fight that could get us over the line with these sort of games. But yeah, I always thought our best chance was a cup run, whether that be the Highland League Cup or the North Scotland Cup. I always thought that was by far our best chance of silverware.
The highlight of the season was undoubtedly winning the North of Scotland Cup. Before we go into looking at the final, the semi-final was a Wednesday night away up at Wick, which is probably one of the most dreaded fixtures in the calendar to a player. We win at 4-2 in extra time, but if you remember, they equalised at the last kick of the game to make it 2-2 in the 90 minutes. Did you think that was it? Did you think we were done, the momentum shifted, and they're going to go on and win it?
Whoever's idea that Wednesday night was my worst enemy at that stage, because Wednesday night up in Wick after a day at work was probably the last thing I ever wanted to do. You go up there, you're playing in a hill, it's always blowing absolute hoolie with this sleet or rain or whatever, but that particular one, I thought, nah, we're good. We're 2-1, we're good. We'll get this done, we'll get to a final. And then they scored, and I thought, you know what, we're done. I thought to myself, we're absolutely done here. And looking back, who was it that scored?
I think Bobo scored in extra time, yeah.
Bobo? Yeah. I remember Bobo scored, and I thought, tell you what, we're back. Do you know what I mean? So, personally, I felt I was on my last legs, especially up at Wick. the ground's always soft up there. You're playing on a hill. You run up and down the hill, and I always thought to myself, what is it with this place? But after a day's work and still probably making that adjustment from full-time football to part-time football, I just thought going into extra time, I've got nothing left in the tank. But I do remember Bobo scoring, and that energised us. I thought we actually came onto a game after that. And obviously we got the fourth goal, and I scored that one. I think I actually scored on the hillside, if I remember right, and went and did the good old knee slide into the corner flag where there was 0 fans to be seen for miles in sight. So it was more of a piss take rather than celebrating with anyone, but it was more me looking for a rest as well, I think. So a hard fought game up there, it always was. And they could play some really good players up there. So just to get over the line was a relief more than anything else.
The final came shortly after that. It's against Forest, who had a right good team that season. Pelly Patterson was the manager. They've gone on a bit of a spending spree, a real recruitment drive, got some absolute quality players in. We'd already lost to them earlier in the season in the league at home, just maybe a month or so before the final. So how did you feel going into the final? It must have felt like, a real uphill task to win the trophy on the day. How was the sort of mood in the camp before the game and in the training leading up to it?
I think leading up to it, the underdog tag kind of suited us, I think. No one expected us to win. Everyone expected Forest to basically railroad us. Like you say, they bought some quality players, and obviously Louis, Franny, Craig Campbell, Sid Mackay, all these sort of boys had just signed for them. And that game that you mentioned back where we actually got beat to Forest, you're quite kind there, because I remember missing a penalty in the last 10 minutes.
That's right, yeah.
If you remember right. So that was in the back of my mind as well, going into the game. And obviously there's banter going back and forth between myself and Louis McKinnon and Franny McMillan all week, saying they basically told us we were getting spanked. And in fairness, I couldn't argue back. And it was more, please don't spank us. We've got a chance here, and I'm quietly confident we can do all right if we play well. But on the other hand, if we don't play well, we could be in for a hiding here. So it was one of those where the underdog tag, I think, actually suited us. We prepared really well during the week, training-wise, I think. Yeah, the game kind of took care of itself. I think they were a bit taken aback by the way we came out the blocks. I think I don't think they expected what they got from us, and I don't think they expected the fan base either from Nairn to be through there, because if I'm honest as well, I didn't know there was that many people in Nairn, let alone in Nairn fans that were in Grant Street Park. So now that was great to see, and that pushed us on even more. The fans were unbelievable that day. And for me, it kind of reiterated what it really meant to be a Nairn fan that day, because the amount of people that, yes, I'd seen them at the games, and yes, I'd seen them happy after winning games, but after that cup final game, there was boys that were coming up and basically hugging you and kissing you and basically buying you drinks for fun and good times. But it kind of showed what it really meant to the people in Nairn, actually what their football club meant to them, and it was great to see.
The opening goal that day in the cup final was scored by yourself. It was from the penalty spot. You mentioned earlier in the season you'd missed one late on when we got beat 2-1. So what goes through your head? You see, I think it was Louis took down Willie Barron in the box. Referee points to the spot. What's going through your head when you grab the ball? Is that miss playing on your mind? I mean, I think, to be fair, I think Forest had a different goalie. I think Martin Ray was injured for the league game and he was back in for the cup final. But does that sort of go through your mind? I'm not sure if you'd hit another penalty since then and scored to get back on track at all in between the league game and the final. So what sort of thoughts are in your head when you step up?
I don't recall taking another penalty in between. So in a way, it was sort of like, yeah, don't miss this one. Come on, don't miss this one. In my head as well, it was funny. It's probably the worst thing to be thinking when you're stepping up to take a penalty when you've just missed one. I'm thinking, okay, I've missed one against the boy. I don't even know the boy's name. Is it Mackenzie?
Ali Mackenzie, I think, was in goal for the league game, yeah.
Yeah, so I'm thinking, okay, I've missed one against Ali Mackenzie. Now Martin's back in, and Martin's probably a better keeper. So I'm thinking to myself, oh, you idiot, why are you thinking this? Nah, the one thing I thought to myself was go with power, hit the target, go with power. If you go down the middle, all good. But my main objective was, hit the back of the net as hard as you possibly can and make the keeper save it, basically. And luckily enough for me, Martin went the wrong way and it's gone in the corner, so I'm delighted.
And we push on from that, and just before half-time, Big Cinders bundles in the second one. So what was it like in the dressing room at half-time? Did Les have to maybe calm things down a bit? And, because I suppose if you go out in the second half, and you're probably going to expect a barrage from Forest, and if they get it back to 2-1 early doors, then you're looking at hanging on. So how were things at half-time? And is it true that you had a hamstring injury at that point, which was really hampering you as well?
Yeah, so before the game, I think I was actually struggling a little bit with it and was a bit touch and go whether I was playing or not. But I think that halftime period basically, it's like you're playing a game, you're struggling with an injury, you stop, and then that makes it 10 times worse. And I'm pretty sure during the whole of halftime, I had ice in my hamstring. Probably because I was running so fast in the first half. But all seriousness, I had ice on my hamstring for the whole half time. But in the changing room, it was more. We had some good, experienced boys in the changing room at that stage. No one was thinking the job was done, if I remember right. Boys didn't really need to calm down. It was more, look, we're only half done here. Let's go and finish this. And I thought that was great. I remember going out in the second half and thinking, come on, let's just finish this. We're 2 up. Let's not blow it now. And I think that was the attitude of everyone. Let's go out and finish this job. But yeah, like I say, we had experienced boys around the change room at that stage that had played at a good level and were experienced players. So yeah, the atmosphere was good. There was a small bit of confidence, I think. And that was the sort of, I wouldn't say the first time that I'd sensed it, but it was more, you know what, these boys for us, they might be top dogs this year and they might go out and win this league. And we're basically put them to the sword in this first half. We can do this. We're good enough to do it. So there was a bit of confidence going back into that second half.
And it wasn't long after half time that you got your name on the score sheet again for the second time. I think you did the easy part. Did Tony Lowe do all the hard work?
Since that goal, I've obviously wound up Louis McKinnon a few times about his pace because I remember running past him. Like, obviously, we're probably 2 of the slowest players that have played Highland League football in our lives, but Tony was probably one of the fastest that played Highland League football. So I remember him beating like 2 or 3 boys in the middle of the park and just tearing it up that day. He was bloody brilliant. Like you say, he basically put it on a plate for me and I just did a little dink over Marty Ray and like I say, delighted. Good old knee slide came out.
Another knee slide in the corner, yeah. Forrest got one back late on, but I think, that third goal really did knock the stuffing out of them. The game's finished, the trophy's lifted, and how's the celebrations at night? You mentioned there it was a big moment in the history of Nairn County as a club. So how was it for the players and the celebrations, the partying after?
It was great. It was one of those where we spent a lot of time in the Clach Club after that. And I remember there was loads of fans in the Clach Club and it was a great atmosphere. In the change room after, believe it or not, I think we had 2 or 3 bottles of champagne in the change room afterwards. I just remember being in the change room and trying to open this bottle of champagne. And there's the 2 other bottles had just been opened and been sprayed absolutely everywhere. So I'm struggling like hell to get this bottle open. And I remember I'm shaking this thing like crazy trying to get it open. I eventually get the bottle top open. But then I think it might be Brian McLeod or might have even been Tony Lowe, basically sprayed his bottle of champagne square in my eyes. So I couldn't see a thing. So I'm like trying to shake this bottle of champagne and spraying it everywhere. Lo and behold, I drop the thing. And it smashes and goes all over the floor. So we've got glass everywhere. So that kind of dampened the mood a little bit. But I remember after the game being in the Clach Club for a good while, my biggest regret is probably not going back to Nairn that night, if I'm honest. There was a big contingent of us from Inverness at the time. We all went out in Inverness, if I remember right. But yeah, a night out in Nairn would have been great that night, I reckon.
It certainly was, I can tell you that.
Yeah, but you can't remember it.
And then the league season rolls on from that. You mentioned your first hat-trick came against Fraserburgh. We then played Fraserburgh that season at home. It's a 6-0 win this time. And you scored another hat-trick. What's your memories of that? I think there's actually a video on YouTube of you scoring a rocket into the top corner in that one.
That goal I didn't realise was actually one of a hat-trick. And it's funny you mentioned the hat-tricks because I can't remember who it was that said to me, "Oh, have you ever scored a hat-trick?" I think it might be on a boy out here. When I played out here, it was I'd gone back in that 6th row basically. So not really scoring any goals. And I was like, no way you scored a hat-trick. And I was like, yeah. In fairness to the 4 that I got, there was always a penalty in there as well. And they're like, nah, it doesn't count. I was like, what do you mean it doesn't count? Hat-trick's a hat-trick surely. And I was like, nah, penalties don't count. So I remember one of them being a penalty, but like you said, that rocket that I scored, or what you want to call a rocket, was probably the first goal that I remember being a goal that I thought to myself, wow, that's a good goal. Do you know what I mean? It's one that I was really excited about and properly celebrated without having a care in the world, if you know what I mean. Sort of ran about like an idiot. Really enjoyed myself. So, like I say, good memories. The best thing about that video is, if you look back, is Brooksy's reaction. I don't know if you've ever noticed. That's this weird hands up in the air turn celebration. You'll need to go and watch the video back, but it's funny as. So yeah, that's probably my favourite part of the video, not the goal, but watching Brooksy's face.
You mentioned earlier as well that season you felt like maybe the Cups were the best position to make an impact in terms of bringing some silverware to the club. You've done that in the North of Scotland Cup. The end of the season sees the Highland League Cup played, and again we make an impact there. we won at Rothes in the first round. We beat Bucky on penalties after a 0-0 draw at Nairn. We go into the semi-final and it's at Fraserburgh, or we lose on penalties ourselves after a 1-1 in extra time. That came only 2 months after that 6-0 game at Station Park. Did you go into that feeling confident, given that you just given them a real going over at home?
Like I said earlier, I always felt going away to the Aberdeenshire teams, we struggled rather than when we were at home. I always felt it was more of a battle, more of a fight. Whereas I felt the players we had were more suited to basically Station Park, the pitch we had, everything else. So in my mind, going to Fraserburgh away, windy as hell day, it was always going to be tough, tight little park. I was confident because I thought, you know what, we're doing really well in the Cups just now. I think we're a great Cup team. On our given day, we can beat anyone. Going into the penalties, I don't remember even my penalty, if I'm honest, but I do remember thinking, we've gone into sort of sudden death penalties now. Who's confident now? And I remember Big Bobo not being confident for some reason. I always fancied him. I don't know why. I just thought, you took a pen, you're going to score, mate, so what's the big deal? But before that, obviously, Big Cinders had a chance to actually win it for us. Yeah. And I thought, you know what, the big fella's cool as ice, cool as a cucumber. He's just going to rock up, Big Cinders, casual as you want, stroll up, just stroke it in the bottom corner. I was 100% sure we were through. And then when that missed, I thought, oh, we're in trouble now. But then again, confidence came back when Bobo stepped up next. But before that, I always wondered why he wasn't wanting to be in the first five. But because I had full confidence in him scoring. Even when he stepped up, I thought, he's not confident here, but I fancy him. But then when he missed, the rest is history, I guess.
That pre-season, you go down on trial to Morecambe. It's not unusual for a player from the Highland League to go on trial to Scottish League teams or a team in the Central Belt, but Morecambe's a bit out of the way. How did that one come about?
I talked about token gestures earlier. It was my stepdad's dad at the time lived in Morecambe. He was the harbour master for the harbour at the time and had a lot of sponsorship and corporate involvement at Morecambe. They were a full-time club, but a really ambitious club in the conference at the time, building new stands and stuff in their stadium and trying to really get their facilities up to scratch. I remember when I signed for Nairn, Les was always very adamant that if any of these sort of opportunities came along, he'd be happy for me to go, wouldn't stand in my way sort of thing. So when this came up, I was my granddad was sort of like, come down and try with us. Like, I know the director of football, I know this. And I was like, Jesus Christ, here we go. So he lined, I thought he was on the wind up to begin with, but he lined it up and he's like, oh, you got a trial in 2 weeks' time. And I was like, crap, okay. So obviously told Nairn, they were happy for me to go down at the time, and went down, and it was during pre-season. I didn't feel like I stood out, but I didn't feel like I was letting myself down, if you know what I mean. I felt like I could quite easily fit into that team. Again, the one thing that I felt that they possessed more than I had was just that real full-time fitness. And I felt if I could get that full-time fitness back, then I could quite easily get into that side. But what materialised was me having a realisation that it was just basically sponsor's grandson basically getting a kick around with the team rather than a trial, which was a shame. Because obviously at that time I was quite keen to make the step back up. If it was going to happen, it was going to have to happen pretty quickly. But in that occasion it wasn't to be, and they basically told me the same old story. No budget basically, but it was basically thanks for coming, but no thanks. It was a good experience, and don't get me wrong, the Sander was good, but like I said, fitness level I would say was just a level above. They just seemed to be athletes.
The Nairn County podcast is brought to you in association with our digital partners, Ziyen Energy. Click on Ziyen.com, find out more.